Today on episode 64 of Rail Talk, we chat about Irad Ortiz's monumental 4,000th career win, get the latest on the HISA legal battles, and talk to Claiborne Farm President Walker Hancock. I'm Joe Bianca. I'm an ownership advisor at West Point Thoroughbreds. And John, there's no steeper drop in class than going from the island of Santorini to Aqueduct at South Ozone Park in Queens last week. But I'm glad to be back, glad to be on the show with you.
Jonathan Green, General Manager at DJ Stable. Joe, I feel like I haven't spoken to you in months. I want to hear all about the trip to Greece, whether or not you actually went to the original Coliseum where races were run all those years ago, the original aqueduct, the OG aqueduct, as you like to say, and also how you landed back in New York and got right back in the saddle and right back in the swing of things. I missed you, buddy.
Missed you too. John, did you introduce yourself?
I did in the very beginning. See, it only took 64 shows for me to start off with Jonathan Green, General Manager of DJ Stable. Even thank you.
Rail Talk is sponsored by the Green Group, the #1 accounting firm in the horse business. Len Green and DJ Stable have over 200 horses, won over 2,500 races. Green Group's got close to 1,000 clients in the horse business because they make them money and save them taxes. And there's a special offer for listeners of Rail Talk. Complimentary, confidential half-hour consultation is in it for you. If you call them up at, what's that number, Michael?
732-634-5100. Green Group.
That's right. That doesn't make you remember it. Nothing will. Or hit him up at greenco.com. Len guarantees he will find you value. He's done it before, but don't take it from me. Take it from this satisfied customer, Frank Taylor of Taylor Made Farm.
I've known Len Green for probably 3 or 4 decades. He does my personal accounting and he also does my business accounting. Len's just got a lot of experience in tax and he really understands that part of the business. But the other thing is he's a horseman and he understands the ins and outs of the horse business and everything. You know, he owns several hundred horses and he's in it every day. So not only does he bring the real knowledge of taxes, but he also brings a deep knowledge of the horse business as well.
Thank you, Frank. And Frank tells no lies. Len will get you squared away for the 2025 tax season. Hit him up at 732-634-5100 or go to greenco.com and see the magic he can work for you and your horse-related business. So it's great to be back from Santorini. As beautiful as it was, I missed you guys, and I missed being on the show. It wasn't a hugging himself, and always.
Look, it's a dead spider.
Buddy.
Sorry, Joe. Go ahead. Yes.
Always looking for a surrogate for me and my hugs. I appreciate that, John. But it was like there wasn't a ton of great racing over the past weekend. The only day I was jealous that I was in Greece was when Carson's Run won the Jockey Club Derby. That was the one day I wished I was at Aqueduct because what a horse he's become. But this past weekend, we had She Feels Pretty who blew away the field in the QE2. Yep. Super nice horse, and she had failed it a couple times at odds on since that big race in the Hilltop to start the season. I think Cherie DeVoe is being smart and not putting her in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf because 1 1/8 to 1 3/8 and shipping across the country, it's a lot for a 3-year-old filly. If it was 1 3/16 at Keeneland, I would say yes, go for it. But I think she's being smart, and hopefully she could turn into a really nice 4-year-old filly. But the biggest news of the weekend, I felt like, was Irad Ortiz getting his 4,000th win on Sunday at Keeneland in the first race. This is kind of, to me, like when LeBron would go up the scoring leaders, the career scoring leaders, and it's like LeBron scores his 30,000th point. He's like 29 years old. I'm like, what is happening? Like Irad has just gone on this rocket ship pace and really hasn't slowed down at all. He wins title after title after title. He's got 4,000 wins now as a 32-year-old, which is pretty staggering. And if he keeps up on this pace, who knows? Maybe he could set the all-time record somewhere down the line. But I always think about him in this context. When he first came on the scene, I think it was about 2009 or so, 2010 in New York. He was one of 2 bug riders who was getting a lot of mounts and a lot of love in New York. The other one was Ryan Curatolo. And Ryan Curatolo, everybody thought was going to be the next big thing. And Irad was a little bit of an afterthought. he had done some okay work, but everyone thought that Ryan was going to be the big time star of that New York bug colony. And then I was there that day. The race I think was the real turning point for Irad Ortiz was the 2012 Alabama. And I don't know if we can put the video up, but he rode questing for Kieran McLaughlin and Godolphin, and she blew away that field. She won by like 9 lengths. And I was just so happy for him because I didn't think he had gotten the kind of love that he deserved relative to the other bug riders. And that was his breakout win. And he was 19 years old at the time. And I just remember telling people around me, like, I'm so glad he got this win. Now people are going to realize how good this guy is. And now 12, 13 years later, here he is already. If he stopped racing today, he'd be a first ballot Hall of Famer. John, any thoughts on Irad and this accomplishment?
Well, Joe, and I mean, 4,000 is a big number, and it's even greater and grander, more grandiose, as you like to say. The fact that he's done it at all the major circuits. I mean, it's not a guy who is winning races at some podunk little, backyard racetrack where he's constantly getting the 9-to-5 shot in every race, and he wins, the meet and moves on to the the following meet. He's doing it on all the major stages. He's doing it in New York, Kentucky, California, Florida. I mean, wherever there's a grade 1 that he has a chance to win, he's going. So it's not even a testament of the fact that he's won 4,000 races, which is huge, but it's where he's doing it, and he's tireless. I mean, Joe, when has there, other than when maybe he has a suspension, when has there been a week where you haven't seen, Ortiz on a favorite in a stake race or on 5 horses, in a nine card field, or 6 races in a 9-card field? He is tireless. He's working at this, and 4,000 at this young point of his career and his age is huge. It's a testament to his work ethic. It's a testament to his agent for being on the right horses, and he strategically picks the right horses to ride, and he rides them well. There's very rarely a time where I will watch a race personally and be like, Irad screwed the pooch on that one. Like, he just doesn't make bad decisions for the most part. You can say he gets overly aggressive. You can sometimes say that, hey, maybe he's getting holes that he shouldn't because other riders are kind of giving him a berth to be able to get through or get around. But for the most part, he does the right thing. He makes the right decision. And the 4,000 number is huge. When we spoke last time, Joe, Paco Lopez also got 4,000 wins last week. And no offense to Paco, because he's a very good journeyman rider, but you would never confuse the two. Paco is doing it more on claiming horses. He's doing it more on kind of the junior circuits, and he is slowly developing into a top tier rider. But Irad is doing it, at such a high level almost from the get go, and it's just been super impressive. But you're right; you project out as to how many wins he's going to have, and is it 8,000, 9,000? I mean, those are crazy numbers. I mean, when you talk about the height of all those races, but a lot of it has to come with, he's got to stay healthy. He's got to continue to make the right decisions, and he's got to have that want to. There are still races where you can see him walking back. I'm talking about Irad walking back to the Jocks colony, and he's annoyed. And when you lose that fire, when you're like, I didn't win, but I got another one coming up, that's when you have to kind of take a step back. He has not lost that fire. He is not away from, being pissed off when he doesn't get a win. And I think that burning desire is what keeps him going.
Yeah, and the effort, like you said, like, you have to ride every race as if it's a grade 1, and that's, I think that people recognize very quickly who gives a shit about every race and who just cares about the big races.
Right.
And he's a guy who rides every, and it happens like, cause he kind of gets the Ramon treatment now. Like, the Ramon Dominguez used to get overbet in New York all the time. Yep. So I bet against a lot of Irad horses. And there are so many times where I find myself saying, fucking Irad, he's in the right spot again. Like, he's like tracking, saving ground, like just in behind the speed. Like, he's going to finish like a freight train and knock me out of this ticket because he's just, his horses aren't great value in general on the tote board, but he rides every race like it's the last race he's ever going to ride. Russell Bays is the all-time winningest rider. I don't know if he's quite going to get to Russell Bays, who's got 12,842 wins.
That's crazy. That is crazy.
I don't know if he's going to quite get there, but who knows? If he rides in his like 50s and 60s, like you said, he's got to stay healthy. Right. But he's got the best shot of anybody to reel him in. even if it seems like an unbreakable record. I want to move on to another story out of New York. I consider Irad mostly a New York rider, even though he's at Keeneland right now. There's an effort to unionize the New York Backstretch. IBEW, the International Brotherhood of Electric Workers, Local 1430, said this has been certified by state officials to begin collective bargaining agreements with thoroughbred trainers. And this is something that they're slowly doing. They've been collecting signatures from employees of 52 different trainers at NYRA tracks, and the NYRA and the state's Public Employment Relations Board certified the first 9 petitions last month. They're going to specific barns. The stables that they have approached are Linda Rice, Alpine Racing. I don't know who that is. Maybe you do, John. Rob Atras Racing, Ed Barker, Michelle Giangiulo, Handle Racing, John Kimball, Bruce Levine, and John Terranova. So they're starting with those barns. And this is, obviously off the heels of all of the Department of Labor fines that we've seen for some of these big trainers. And you've heard a lot of people complain that, it's making it impossible to do business in New York. In general, I think, if you can't have a time clock and you can't pay your workers a fair wage and actually, take record of all their hours and do the right thing by them, you don't need to be doing business in New York. I know it's more complicated than that. John, you probably have more experience with this. I'm curious what your thought is about this effort.
Well, Joe, interesting enough, they tried to unionize the Backstretch 3 decades ago, and it was a colossal failure. And there were many reasons why it was a failure. But I think what the union is doing now, where instead of trying to canvass the entire Backstretch and try to convince people to change their ways, because God knows people hate changing their ways. They love inertia. People love inertia. They hate change. And instead, what they've done is they've gone after 9-10 different outfits with the idea of, we're going to put pressure on these groups first and focus our strategy and our intensity on them. And if they turn, then it's going to be easier. It's going to be a domino effect for some of these other outfits to do it. I guess the question really is, on the one hand, it's like, hey, people who work those kind of hours deserve the benefits that they should, whether it's, increased wages or time off or what have you. It is not a 9-to-5 job, as we all know. Is it going to increase the amount of expense that ultimately trainers and ultimately owners have to put out there? Yes, it will. Is it going to make it for a better, safer work environment? I don't know. That's something that is beyond the scope of my abilities. But Linda Rice said it best in the article, and I'm not quoting her directly, but basically she was like, look, Department of Labor came in and they made us put up time clocks. And was it a pain in the ass? Yeah, but it's the course of doing business. And if we had a fast food restaurant or we had any other kind of business with hourly wages, they have time clocks. And it turns out that it was better because now I know exactly who's there, who's not, whether or not they're really pulling their weight, et cetera. So she spun it into a positive. And basically she was like, is this going to affect us? Yeah, but we're running a business. It's not just that we're training horses. We're actually running a business. And if we're running a legitimate business, then sometimes you have to pay your employees the fair wage and give them the proper benefits. And if it means that it's going to be more expensive, then it is more expensive, and owners have to ultimately decide if they want to be in the business or not. I think like anything else, Joe, the industry is trying to quote unquote legitimize itself. And this is the cost of doing business. Do I like it as an owner that's going to have to pay additional, monies for day rate, to the trainer? No, I mean, you never want to pay extra money, but does this mean that we're going to have better employees, more qualified employees? Maybe instead of somebody taking a job somewhere else, they're going to take a job at the racetrack on the Backstretch to take care of our horses, and the horses will be taken care of better. And therefore it'll get even better results from those horses. Then yeah, I guess I can see the argument that there's a reason to do it. I know a lot of trainers say they don't make money on their day rate, and from an accounting standpoint, that's probably true. So this is going to be more of a flow through expense for them. But in this day and age, you have to run things as a legitimate business. It's no longer the Wild West. And if trainers don't like it, unfortunately, that's kind of too bad. That's just the way the rest of the world is. If you don't like it, then run a lemonade stand where you don't have to take taxes out and worry about unionizing.
Yeah, no, it's summed up perfectly. And at the end of the day, like unions aren't perfect, but in industries where there are no unions, abuse is rampant. Like it's just been proven time after time that corporations in particular, but businesses in general will take advantage of their employees if they don't have representation. It's just a general fact of life. And like I said, unions aren't perfect and they do make things hairy sometimes. And there is some corruption on that end too. But at the end of the day, they're a net good, I think, for the workers. And, this is, like you say, either you're running a business or you're not. Like it's the kind of thing that, yes, it's a burden. Yes, it's going to be increased expenses and already an expensive sport. So I get that there's a lot of nuance to it. But at the end of the day, like if the workers want to unionize, who are you to say they can't do that and try to stop them?
Right.
We're going to talk to John Roach in a little bit just to switch gears one more time about the HISA legal fights. This has been an ongoing thing. I like John, but I hate that we have to have so many goddamn lawyers on the show. Just as a general rule, because it's he's a smart guy, but at the end of the day, like our fans want to hear about racing. They want to hear about the product on the racetrack. But we got to do the service and keep them updated on the future of the sport from a litigation standpoint. And we thanks to John, for agreeing to do that, and thanks to Alan Foreman a couple of weeks ago. Before we get to that, I kind of just want to talk about what happens if HISA is declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. So we're on the clock now. The Supreme Court new term has started. They're expected to issue their decisions in June. So that's about eight months away, if I'm doing the math correctly. And, what I don't want is if that happens, and I'm not bullish considering the Supreme Court, I don't want all the progress that's been made in the last couple of years to disintegrate into dust. And I'm curious what you think, John, because I do think that HISA has had one effect in terms of, nationalizing the drug policy, which is huge, and the enforcement mechanism, which is huge, and increasing the racetrack safety standards, which is huge. But I do think that there has been a vibe shift to for lack of a better term, in the industry, that people are on notice now and they understand that we can't have horses breaking down left and right, or else racing is going to go away. And I think in particular in New York, there's been an unbelievable effort to make racing safer, especially after Saratoga last summer. And what my question is, do we lose all the progress that we've made if HISA goes away and is declared unconstitutional? Or have we gone far enough down this road now that there's no turning this ship around, at least in the major jurisdictions, and they're going to continue to follow the policies and the guidance that HISA has helped introduce into the business to keep horses safer on the racetrack? I hope so, but I'm curious what you think, John.
I have a very pessimistic view, Joe. I think you very, very correctly laid it out with regard to the union argument, which is if people see an opportunity to take advantage of other people or situations, they're going to. And I think that our industry 4 years ago, 5 years ago, you and I talked about it a lot, was at the point where we were on the brink. We were on the precipice of being the next circus or dog racing or highlight, and where the world has just passed us by. And part of the thing that people kept banging the table about was the rest of the world doesn't have we don't have credibility in the industry in the rest of the world. People don't believe that what we're putting out there is a viable sport and is something that that they are willing to wager on or follow, because bad apples are taking advantage left and right of the industry. And if you look at it back then, that was true. I mean, it really came to a head, with Jason Service and Jorge Navarro. It came to a head with some of the other testings that were coming out as far as horses that were coming up as positive, with injuries and fatalities on the increase. And basically we needed to have an adult in the room. And that's what begot us HISA. Now, and like you said, HISA's had phenomenal results, especially in comparison to the non-HISA jurisdictions. Here's the problem in my eyes. Problem is that I think what's going to happen is if the Supreme Court rules that HISA is unconstitutional, there was such a huge amount of resources that were put into trying to get HISA up and moving, And those political backers aren't in power anymore. So if HISA's gone, then, I know people on the opposite side are saying, well, we'll just implement our own set of rules, national set of rules like we've been talking about. But it's like there's no momentum for it anymore. And the government, I think, is going to look and say, we've given you guys opportunity to be adults in the room, and we've funded it, and we've given you all the resources possible to try to make this happen. And all you did was shoot yourself in the foot again. You know what, guys? We're not backing it anymore because the general population has no appetite for it. Bettors aren't interested anymore for a lot of reasons, including, the pool, the computer
manipulation.
Wagering. Yeah, pool manipulation. Now we're going to go back to our horses, being assisted chemically or not. And it's just it's going to be the house of cards that we were based on 5 years ago, but now we don't have any backing and there's no adult in the room, and it's going to take years before the next set of rules, if there are uniform rules that come about, to get into place. And Joe, I just don't think that the industry can handle it. I don't want to sound like a do or dyer, but to me it's like either HISA works or we don't have an industry anymore, and I think it's that simple.
That's not the answer I was looking for, but I can't argue. I'd argue if I could. I do think that there are some wheels in motion. Like I think in New York and California in particular, I want to shout out California because they've been a shining example of what to do to make racing safer. And that's another topic for another day. Like if we lose California racing, we lose a ton, but we also lose the jurisdiction that's doing the best work on the safety front. And that'd be another huge blow to the industry at large. So yeah, I do think that there are some wheels in motion that certain jurisdictions and certain racetracks are going to try to continue that progress. But I agree. Like I just think that there's too much incentive for people to do the wrong thing in this business unless they're forced not to. And I think that's that's a mindset that I don't think is going to completely go away. And yeah, the idea that the HBPA, like if HISA goes away, is going to try to pass this like national reform, come on. You had how many years to do that before HISA came around? It was like, I always say this, but it reminds me of like when Obamacare was passed. And they spent so much time trying to repeal Obamacare that everybody reasonably started asking, so what's your alternative?
Right.
And they slapped together some like bullshit plan that was like pseudo Obamacare. And it was like, well, where was this plan all along?
Right.
If you really wanted to fix the healthcare system, if you really wanted to fix racing's drug problem, where was this plan? So the idea that if HISA goes away, this other thing is going to step in and basically do the same job, that part is highly unlikely to me. But we'll talk to John about it and see where he thinks we're at, and cross our fingers that we continue down a progressive path in this business. Real Talk is sponsored by TaylorMade, the worldwide leader in thoroughbred sales, marketing, and horse care. They're family owned and operated since 1976, and they've grown from a small boarding farm into the worldwide leader in thoroughbred sales. We see it at pretty much every sale, especially the yearling sales. They had a banner year again at Keeneland September, and it's because when you're with them, you're family. And TaylorMade treats every client as if they're the most important client in the book. And every horse as if they're the most important horse that's going to go into that ring. And that's not easy with the amount of horses that they manage. And don't forget about TaylorMade stallions too. I mean, at this time, obviously his success has exploded on every surface, every racetrack, but there's a lot of other good action and good value on that stallion roster. I think about Instagram. I think about Tacitus. We bought 2 Tacitus at West Point earlier this year, and they both sold really well. And on the Instagram front, we ran, John, this is a little synergy here between DJ and West Point and TaylorMade. When Volt ran so well on Saturday to be second with an 87 buyer, the only reason that wasn't a winning buyer was because of Key Waden,
right,
who is from OXO Equine and Chad Brown by Instagram, ran third in that huge Tip Top Thomas maiden race on Travers Day. That horse is an absolute monster. It was almost like winning. It was almost like winning running second to that horse. And I mean, that's just what you love to see in a first crop sire, have that, kind of put your flag in the ground type horse. This is a big time animal, and I think Instagram's going to get plenty more of those.
Yep. And Joe, just to jump in also, we looked at a bunch of horses, obviously, at the past couple of yearling sales, and Knicks Go. There were Knicks Go's that came up on our list time and time again. And, they're looking like athletes. And I'm shocked. I mean, you can see it, hear it in my voice and see it in my face, how many times there was a Knicks Go on our list, on our short list, to the point where I actually called our shortlisters Lauren Carlisle and Kim Valerio. And I was like, are you guys on the payroll with TaylorMade? Because there's just constant Knicks Goes on these lists all the time. And it was just because there are just so many good looking athletes. So he's another one to look at. I don't know if this is public knowledge, but I will drop this bomb, for our listeners, that not this time they are raising his stud fee, not to 200,000, which they very well could, but they're raising him from 150 to 175, which puts him in the top 10 stallions as far as prices go for 2025. And Joe, he is the youngest of the top 10. So talk about value and talk about a horse that's going to be around for another decade and a half. Not this time is hitting the ground, and I'm not breaking any news on that front, but he's going to stand for $175,000 live full stand and nurse for those mares who are qualified. So I would send those matings in TaylorMade as soon as possible for that horse. And oh, by the way, look at some of the other stallions as well, because they are throwing athletes, and athletes beget runners.
Yeah, if I could be an investor in TaylorMade stallions, TaylorMade in general, but TaylorMade stallions in particular, that's a winning stock, I think. And yeah, great call on not this time. 175,000. If there were ever a bargain at $175,000 stud fee, he's the one. And we do have one at West Point. We had a not this time colt from Keeneland September that we got a tiny little bit of availability on. So any West Point partners that are listening in and have ever wanted a not this time, go jump on them.
How much do you have left, Joe? How much do you have left?
Like 15%, I think.
15%? Okay.
John, you can't buy all 15.
Come on. For the love of God, man. That's what I was going to offer.
You got to leave it up to the partners.
All
but
right.
Yeah, that's a unique opportunity for sure. So we are so stoked to bring on this next guest to the Rail Talk studio. He's the outside counsel for the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Authority. Busy job these days. John Roach, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here, guys. This is my first video podcast lifetime. So a very exciting moment in my life.
You're doing great. You look slick with the earpods in. So yeah, you're off to a good start, John. But before we get into the legal questions, let's just talk a little bit about you and your background. Because like one of the criticisms of HISA, and I think mostly unfounded criticisms in the early days at least, was that these are a bunch of empty suits who don't know anything about the racing business coming in to interfere in our livelihoods. So tell us right now, are you an empty suit?
Yeah, well, I might be an empty suit, but I'm also a lifetime degenerate horse gambler. Unlike a lot of people that bet on other things. I think I've been in a casino 2 or 3 times in my whole life. I don't sports bet. I don't even have any of these sports bet apps that they have in Kentucky. I bet on horse racing. I've been doing that since I was in middle school or high school. My parents were public school teachers. I didn't grow up like on the breeding side or anything like that. I grew up going to Keeneland. And so my whole experience in horse racing was from a betting standpoint. And then I'm sure some of your viewers know Tom Lute, who ran Vinery Stables, Santa Anita. Tom's one of my best friends. He called me one day. I'd served on the Kentucky Supreme Court. And what you find about politics is, like, when you're general counsel of the governor or a Supreme Court justice, you've got a lot of friends. And then when you lose and the voters kind of kick you to the side of the curb and send you to early retirement, a lot of those, everybody's kind of lost your number. Right. But Tom was always a dear friend. And one day he called me out of the blue and he said, "Can you do equine law?" And of course, immediately I said, "Well, of course," even though I'd never done it. And so that began my role in around thoroughbred horse racing as a lawyer. I've always continued to be somebody that has loved to be at the racetrack. I love the rhythm of the track. I like the old simulcast parlors as well. Regardless of how people feel about HISA, most people in HISA have got a lot of experience in thoroughbred horse racing, and they love the horses. And, the funny thing, not to go on, is, I I was also the vice chairman of the Kentucky Racing Commission, and I was against HISA. So Andy Barr, one of the key sponsors of HISA, he worked for me in his first political job. I'm dear friends with him. But I always thought, well, we do it right in Kentucky. It's everybody else's problem. And I really had the same thing happen to me that Tom Rooney talks about at the NTRA. When the circus closed, I just couldn't believe it. And I realized that I might need to focus on practical ways to save a sport I love. And so that's my horse story. And I got onto this. I thought I was going to be working for the HISA nominating committee. I thought it was going to be like a 2-month project. And it's been like Gilligan's Island. It's been now like 3.5 years. It's been tiring, but I've loved it because I think we're doing everything we can to demonstrate that we're doing right by the horse. And I think that's how we're going to save the sport and then hopefully grow it one day.
And John, your background is great. Actually, our paths crossed when you were at Vinery because we were one of the original breeders to More Than Ready back when the Waltons were running Vinery. So I think somewhere I have like an original letter from you, like typed on the typewriter letter from you, congratulating us on the great decision of being involved in More Than Ready. But that farm really exploded and had great leadership. And I know you learned from good people there. I'm going to ask you to dumb some of these questions, these answers down so I can understand it, because now we're going to get into the legal aspects of what you're trying to do. Unlike the big audience, our audience are meat and potato racing people that really enjoy and have a good understanding of what's going on, but want to understand from a legal standpoint just what the status of HISA and the rules are. So walk us through right now. It looks like that HISA has been brought up in 3 different circuit courts. 2 of them say that after a little bit of change that now it is constitutional. One of them is saying it's not constitutional, but if I understand it right, it's the penalty enforcement side of the ruling of HISA that there is in question. Just give us kind of an overview of where we're at and correct me if I'm wrong on that.
So, and let me just say, we have never taken the position that people shouldn't be able to go to court and exercise their rights. It does get a little frustrating that we are fighting so for example, Mr. Walmsley, the head of the Arkansas HBPA, Arkansas HBPA is a plaintiff in the Fifth Circuit case that originated in Lubbock, Texas. I guess in an article last week, he said that he was part of the leadership of the national HBPA that directs that litigation. Well, Mr. Walmsley individually sued us in the Little Rock case that is now the Eighth Circuit case. So for people that own a private business, can you imagine being sued by a company and then the CEO of that company that sued you went and sued you for the exact same thing in 2 separate lawsuits? So that's where there's a little bit of frustration. But I'll walk you through it. The Lubbock case, which is the Fifth Circuit case, that is the case that has, 10 or so or a few more HBPA state chapters in the national chapter. That's the case that went to the Fifth Circuit. Now, it gets even a little more confusing because a group of racetracks in Texas filed a separate lawsuit in Amarillo, and that case was combined with the Lubbock case. So that's actually 2 cases. And so that case went to the Fifth Circuit twice. First time they declared it unconstitutional. The congressional fix, the amendment was passed. We went back the second time and they said, well, your rulemaking authority, the FTC's rulemaking authority is constitutional, but the enforcement provisions are not. And the Sixth Circuit case was brought by the state of Oklahoma, the Oklahoma Racing Commission, all 3 of the thoroughbred tracks in Oklahoma, Remington, Will Rogers, Fair Meadows, the harness racing folks, and I think maybe our harness racing farm. Basically the same arguments, but one other 10th Amendment argument. The Sixth Circuit, when we went to oral argument up there, after the Fifth Circuit declared us unconstitutional, the chief judge of the circuit, Judge Sutton, he just interrupted during oral argument and he's like, wasn't this a bipartisan piece of legislation? Why don't you just go and get them to fix this, add this paragraph, problem solved? So that's what we did. Mm-hmm. And so the Sixth Circuit ruled that we were constitutional. The Eighth Circuit, they ruled this summer that we were constitutional. This was about a month ago. Now, the Oklahoma HBPA, basically most of their officers and directors, they sued us in a separate lawsuit in Oklahoma, making the same claims that the entity, the Oklahoma HBPA, is making in the Lubbock case, the Fifth Circuit case. They just copycatted the lawsuit and brought it individually in Oklahoma. And that's the one that this summer we had to travel out there for for a restraining order hearing. And you can imagine what the cost of us to travel and do all this. So again, it's not about, okay, we're having to defend a lawsuit and we're going to go to the Supreme Court. And we haven't even talked about the Louisiana case. So the point is, this idea that that is sometimes said by the other side, well, this is just a good faith dispute, and why can't we all be friends? Which, of course, Lisa Lazarus and our board have bent over backwards to collaborate, allow input. I mean, typically, if anybody in your listening audience has been involved in lawsuits, you generally don't communicate with the other side while they're suing you.
Right.
We have done that regularly without lawyers around, all the inputs we get. So, I am really proud to be associated with the board that I'm associated with and the leadership team. And you all have had Lisa on, and you all know Lisa. She's a collaborator. She listens. And when she can make changes that are positive, that make sense, she's done that. But, at some point, you have to call, I thought it was important for somebody to finally come on and kind of explain what I call serial litigation.
Right.
And so what's funny now is all these people have made these choices to go to multiple courts, and we've won in more courts. They've won in one court. And in the filing at the Supreme Court, again, this is what they wrote. They said, we're going to seek an injunction for all our members across the country. And to us, that seemed a little interesting. And, I think that based on some of the communication I've heard about in the last week, there might be some change in approach on that. But, you think about the Oklahoma situation. So the state of Oklahoma, the Oklahoma Racing Commission, and every thoroughbred racetrack in Oklahoma made a choice to come to Lexington, Kentucky to sue HISA and say that we were unconstitutional. The Oklahoma HBPA, they made a choice to go to Lubbock in the Fifth Circuit and make their claim. So I guess the Oklahoma HBPAs, if we get to Lubbock, I'll get to the Supreme Court in a minute, they're going to say you can't enforce HISA in Oklahoma, even though another court has told the state of Oklahoma, the Racing Commission, and all three racetracks were constitutional. So I think this is one of the things that happens when you do serial litigation. It kind of causes confusion, uncertainty. Alan Foreman last week, agreed with me, regulatory chaos. So that's the lower court picture. Right. At the Supreme Court, the Sixth Circuit case is pending on a cert petition. The industry publications this summer correctly said that the court had denied the cert petition from the Sixth Circuit case. But there's a very obscure rule that allows a party to ask for reconsideration. So when the Fifth Circuit opinion came out, after the U.S. Supreme Court had denied the Sixth Circuit case, those plaintiffs asked the Supreme Court to reconsider the cert petition on the Sixth Circuit. The court has now asked us for a response and has asked the federal government for one. So the Sixth Circuit case has a cert petition filed at the Supreme Court. The Eighth Circuit case, they just filed a cert petition last week at the U.S. Supreme Court, and we'll have to respond to that. And then we filed our cert petition at the Supreme Court out of the Fifth Circuit case yesterday. Right. So hot off the press, right. It's not even on the court docket yet. We have pending before the Supreme Court a motion It's called a motion to stay the mandate of the Fifth Circuit. And we have asked the court, please consider not allowing the Fifth Circuit opinion to go into effect so that we can all just come to the Supreme Court and you can decide. We don't have to go back to the district court and fight about what's going to look like. We won't have any regulatory uncertainty. And that's what's before the Supreme Court, that exact motion. And that's called the shadow docket.
Okay. So basically, John, let me just interrupt you. So if I understand this right, basically what HISA is asking is, instead of fighting all these multiple little forest fires, that are coming up, over the past couple of months, basically they're saying to the Supreme Court, will you just look at this in its entirety and make a ruling and basically cover all of these pending cases? Is that the understanding?
Well, no, really. I mean, we're going to take the position that what we're really asking the court to do is to not change the status quo while we're at the Supreme Court.
Got it.
So we went to them and said, look, let's just keep the status quo, and then let's get to the court as fast as we can. And we even offered to let Texas, we would go to court and let the Fifth Circuit mandate apply to the Fifth Circuit, which would treat Texas like West Virginia and Louisiana until the court decides, which would allow them to export their signal. And so they've chosen not to do that. They've been kind of upset that we talked about this, but the reality is we think that if we've been operating for a few years, what's a few more months of the status quo to get this thing decided and get it done quickly? And let's all know the Supreme Court is going to decide one way or the other, and then we can go forward from there.
Got it.
All right. Well, it sounds to me from following these cases and from listening to you that the HBPAs are kind of court shopping, judge shopping, circuit shopping until they get the right result for them. And the Fifth Circuit sounds like it was the right result for them. I would be happy that this is going up to the Supreme Court, because in the perfect world, the Supreme Court is the ultimate arbiter, with not swayed by politics or ideology or any of that stuff, and they're just going to rule on the merits of the case. I don't believe that bullshit anymore. Like, that's and maybe I'm being too cynical, but
I think you're being too cynical.
Well, please, I'm telling you to talk me off the ledge on this, because the way this court has been politicized, I just find it hard to believe that they're going to rule in favor of more administration from the federal government and its sub entities. But tell me why I'm wrong.
Well, I mean, I probably hold the unpopular opinion that the court's not political. I have a lot of faith in the U.S. Supreme Court, and there's a lot going on in this case besides the administrative state. It is way more than you want to hear. But the U.S. Supreme Court for the last few years, and particularly the last term, has been highly critical of the Fifth Circuit's approach to what is called facial challenges. This is across the entire spectrum of the court. There were the big Facebook case last year, a couple of other big cases. The conservatives, and the point is, when you make a facial, so Joe, if you had an action taken specifically against you by HISA, and they attempted to do something to you, and you went through the system, and then you went to federal court, that's called an as-applied challenge. If nothing's happened to you, so because you remember, they filed the Lubbock lawsuit a year before HISA went into effect. They filed the lawsuit in March of 21, so they made what's called a facial challenge. And under the Supreme Court's rules and law, to win on a facial challenge, you have to prove that there's no set of scenarios or way to interpret the statute in any way under the sun that it can't be constitutional. So for example, Clarence Thomas has even written, we might even need to think whether people should even be able to bring facial challenges. So certainly there are members of the court that have got questions about the non-delegation doctrine. They've written them in separate opinions. But this case is not only going to be about the non-delegation doctrine, it's also going to be about facial challenges. And remember, our statute now pretty much mirrors the FINRA statute, which has been the law for almost 80 years under the SEC. So I think no matter what happens, I actually believe the court on all sides of the ideological spectrum calls it as they see them. I think some lower courts might have been politicized, but maybe I'm naive, but I think our U.S. Supreme Court, I think they do a great job. You can't look at it on a case by case basis.
Right.
And, you know, I mean, if you think about it, like Chevron, which really doesn't impact HISA, but everybody talked about Chevron this summer. You know, the question is, what's probably going to happen with Chevron is it's going to make Congress write more specific laws, which is probably a good thing. So, you know, lucky for HISA, they wrote really specific law in HISA. So, you know, again, we're not going to have the kind of Chevron concerns that maybe other things have.
Yeah.
Anyway, not to be disagreeable, Joe, but I think that the court is a victim of kind of all the other things going on in our world and the politics and the media and you know.
I would say it's a product of that, not a victim of that, but we disagree.
Yeah.
That's okay.
You know, Joe, ironically enough, John brings up a point about the facial challenges. That was my nickname in high school. I was John Facially Challenged Green. So it's all coming back full circle. John, a quick question for you. So we've offered time and interview to Eric Hamelback. We've had some of our friends of the show actually reach out and say, hey, would you come on the show because we'd like to have an engaging conversation. Is there, but he hasn't, and that's fine. As far as the case goes, are there more things that we're in alignment with, we being HISA? HISA's in alignment with Hamelback and his group, or are there more things that you guys are disagreeing about? In other words, is there common ground and we're only fighting over 2 or 3 points? Or is it, you know, the baby's been thrown out with the bathwater, either it's going to be HISA's rule or it's going to be kind of back to the rules of the way it was until we can get a new group to come in and pilot the ship?
Oh, I don't think there's much common ground between the HBPA leadership and HISA. I mean, one of the things your listeners, and you all might not be aware of this, you know, well, you're certainly aware of, you know, the issues with metformin and all the things that happened and the kind of the pause that we put in. And then there's this study going on at the RMTC. And you might remember there have been other times, whether it's provisional suspensions, that we've made some changes. Do you know what's happened every time we've made one of those changes? They have made court filings and used them against us and say, so we've actually done things that the horsemen have asked us to do.
Right.
And then they put court filings in to say, see, they're unconstitutional. And so, for example, on metformin, which I can't imagine anybody would be against what we did, you can go to the Fifth Circuit website. They filed a letter saying, look what they've done. So for 2 years, everything we've tried to do, to try to address concerns, it gets filed in court against us. And most people don't know that. But, you know, it's kind of the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I mean, that was one of the things in the early days of HISA that always cracked me up in a morbid sense, was that, like, they would say that the rules are too rigid, and then when they switched up the rules, they would be like, "See, they don't know what they're doing. They're switching up the rules nonstop."
Yeah,
So,
right.
You can't have it both ways.
And really, what we do is we just kind of defer things until the next round of rule changes. I mean, so for example, you know, like all those cases on human substances of abuse, you know, they're now capped out at 60 days. They're all technically stayed, waiting until we get the next round of rules. But at every instant, I mean, you can go read any of the briefs. They have pages of them. Every time we issued any guidance, any kind of thing, they have gone to court and say, see, they're unconstitutional. So it's, you know, I guess, you know, there's that old saying, no good deed goes unpunished. So.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
for
But
sure.
credit to my board and Lisa. They have focused on doing the right thing. And, you know, the HISA board at every turn has just said, let's just do the right thing. Let's do right by the horses. Let's do right by the jockeys. Let's do right by the horsemen. And because they know, you know, look, you can divide the world, HISA, in really two camps. And it's people that are for it really kind of believe we're facing an existential crisis. and the people that are against it don't. And that's okay. But, if you believe that racing is facing an existential crisis, and, the circus, and then my friend Drew Fleming sat down with me one time, and he walked me through how much money the Californians bet into the Kentucky pools. He knew he could appeal to my Kentucky. And so we're all connected, let alone the breeding industry, the buyers, all that. But we're all connected. We've got to have California racing thrive. I mean, does anybody believe politicians in a Northeast state who aren't kind of more from the conservative rural area would turn their back on horse racing if the public said we don't want it anymore? I mean, obviously there's going to be horse racing probably no matter what in Kentucky and Louisiana. But what about New York? What about Delaware? What about Maryland?
Right.
These states that now is quite rural. And so, for me, we've got to have national governing standards. We have to have national uniform rules, all these things that we're doing. And to me, I think Alan Foreman said last week that the compact has a chance of 0 to none. So it's really, if we're going to have a national approach, it's really HISA, or I don't know what the other options are. I guess we go back to the old system. Right. But that doesn't make me feel real good about our future.
No, not at all. John, one more question. We're fast forward to 2025, 2026. We're looking back at the Supreme Court's decision. Where do you see horse racing at that point?
Lisa said it, and I totally agree. I hope we get to the point where we're not talking about HISA. I mean, quite frankly, I think we need to get the safety and the integrity taken care of. Look, there's still some things within the ADMC program that we need to work on and improve. But I'm hoping in a couple of years, we'll have this knocked off so that our industry and our leadership in the industry can start focusing on, well, I could say growing the sport, but keeping it from going, look at the handle. I felt like the handle number story last quarter was pretty depressing. That all this great purse money, everything else, and our handles still go down. Our industry we need to get the safety and the integrity taken care of. Stop arguing about it. And we need everybody to focus on how we introduce people to this game that we love, and how we grow the sport, and how we attract gamblers. And we need to have this is beyond the scope of HISA, but we need to have a discussion. We need to have a discussion about focusing on the customer in horse racing. In a couple of years, I hope that we've got this safety and integrity going. Nobody even hardly mentions HISA. We have some proceedings here or there in terms of people that are violating the rules, because the truth is most people are following the rules.
Right.
Most trainers are doing things right. But we increase the integrity. And then everybody can focus on growing this sport. That's what we need to do.
John, thank you so much for coming on and giving us your insights. I appreciate all the work you and the HISA board are doing. Keep up the great work. Fingers crossed for a good result, because I think, like we've said, this is, where do we go if not here? So appreciate the time and appreciate you coming on.
I appreciate you all having me. I'll never forget my first video podcast. So this is
You're
good.
Pro now. You're pro. We'll get you a ring light and everything. You're set. Rail Talk is sponsored by Fasig-Tipton. Fasig-Tipton had a big week upstate at Saratoga. The Fasig-Tipton Fall Saratoga mix sale happened yesterday, which was Tuesday. And Hip 301 was a filly from the first crop of Cyberknife, sold for $230,000 to top the sale. Weanlings were selling left and right for six figures, and usually that's not one of the sales that I usually think is going to produce explosive results. There's always a bunch of really solid horses you can find up there in October, but man, were the sales results kind of through the roof for the Saratoga mix sale. And John, you've been following this sale longer than I have.
It really was, Joe. This one in particular. I mean, you had weanlings, out of first crop. Jack Christopher. You had Vacoma, who is lighting the world on fire. Drain the Clock. Early Voting, his first group. Hard Spun. Practical Joke. Good Magic. Cyberknife, you mentioned already. So not only did the quality of the athletes improve at this sale, but the pedigrees improved also. I think people in the New York program are realizing that you can take some Kentucky bred stallions, bring them up to New York, and there's additional value. And it used to be where that sale was a place to go and find inexpensive horses. Now it's just a place to go to find value. I would guarantee you the majority of those horses are going to get repurposed and pinhooked, and you'll see them again in the yearling sales, going forward, because they're just that good looking, Joe. So hats off again to Fasig-Tipton. They're kicking ass in so many different platforms. I mean, digital. Poor Anna Seitz, has to be the most traveled person in the industry, going to California, doing stuff at home, in those sales, digital, going out to the training centers to try to facilitate and recruit horses. She does an amazing job for Fasig, and the Fasig team is just a phenomenal outfit. They are kicking butt on all levels, all sales, all the time, Joe.
They really have had an incredible year. Don't forget the Kentucky October yearling sale is next week. I've always said that this, I think, is one of the most underrated sales on the calendar. You got a bunch of top-notch horses that you can find there, including Torpedo Anna, who's going to be the big favorite in the Breeders' Cup Distaff. So go find your next Torpedo Anna at the October 21st to 24th Kentucky October yearling sale. And, of course, we've got the November sale, November 4th, appointment viewing. Everybody clear your calendars to see those mares and those weanlings in the ring. And then we'll close out the year December 4th with the Mid-Atlantic December Mixed and Horses of Racing Age sale in Timonium. And then one last digital sale, December 5th through the 10th. Nominate now. John can tell you all about how those digital sales have worked out for him and DJ Stable. Don't miss out. Get in while you still can. So we're so thrilled to bring this next guest to the Rail Talk studio. He is the president of Claiborne Farm, Walker Hancock. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. I've always wanted to be on here, so thanks for making it come to fruition.
Well, that works because we always wanted to have you on too. So here we go. This better be good, damn it.
No promises.
So we'll get into the stallion news. This is a big time of the year for Claiborne Farm. You're introducing your 2025 stallion roster. But I wanted to ask a quick question about a story that came about last month. So there was a mare who ended up in a kill pen who had been consigned by Claiborne Farm at some point along the line and sold. And, this has been a kind of a bugaboo for racing, is how do we make sure after horses are sold that they don't end up in bad spots? And you and Claiborne have, put forth a pretty good proposal, I think, about potentially having an age limit to horses you can sign and introducing the mares you can sign to your in-house retirement program. Can you just give us an update on that and why that's so important to you guys?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think a lot of aftercare is obviously a very hot topic and one that needs to be solved sooner than later. A lot of people have some really good ideas, but instead of waiting for something to happen, we just figured we might as well be proactive. And, a lot of these older mares, while some clients want to move them along and it is a business for them, obviously none of them intend for them to end up in kill pens, and that's certainly not their intention. And by no means are they trying to be greedy, but, they're done with them and they want another breeder to have an opportunity to breed out of them and have an offspring by one of the mares. But after that, sometimes the horses end up in a wrong spot, and that's what happened to this in this latest example. It's an unfortunate situation. Obviously we were the consignor of record, so we were contacted, and we had contacted the client that sold the mare, and she immediately felt horrible. Obviously that was never the intention, as it is for no one's intention. But we both donated to the program, and she's now paid for at least for the rest of her life. Thankfully, because she was found and located and now is taken care of in an aftercare facility. But yeah, so it started a conversation internally, like, well, should we really be selling maybe 18-year-old mares, 20-year-old mares? And, instead of waiting for maybe the sales companies to do something, we just figured, well, maybe going forward, obviously November entries, January entries are probably already out for now this year, but going forward, maybe we're just going to self-impose a rule like, if you want to sell an older mare, that's fine, but Claiborne's not going to take part of that. We've always tried to do what's right by the horse and lead by example, and maybe hopefully others will follow.
No, I think that's a great precedent to throw it there. It's almost like a challenge to the rest of the industry. Like, look, guys, this is what we're doing. We're drawing a line that we're not going to sell horses that are above a certain age, and we're going to set up, an opportunity for them if they want to be pensioned to have a home. I think it's great leading by example. And you mentioned, consignments that are coming up in November and January sales, and the big ticket items, at least that the public is looking at, has to be the Stuart Janney breeding dispersal that you guys are involved with. Give us a little bit of background as to how that all developed and how that came about.
Well, his family's been in the horse racing business for long before I was born. It goes back to days even before Ruffian, and they've always had a relationship with Claiborne Farm. So I know it's been a tough decision for Mr. Janney to make, but he's getting a little older, and it's harder to keep up with 30 plus horses. And I feel for him, I really do. But it's definitely bittersweet. But we'll try and put on a good show for him and get his mares moved along and get as much money as we possibly can. He's obviously going to keep the weanlings or yearlings and the 2-year-olds, and it will be a 5 or 6 year process before I'm sure he's finally out of the business. But it is a complete dispersal of breeding stock.
Walker, do you feel like that there's added value just by the fact that they've gone through his program? I remember, years ago when a number of clients over the years have come out of the industry, and it seems like dispersal means that people have a chance to buy into that history. Do you feel like there's going to be added value in that sense? Absolutely.
He's a breed to race guy, and there's very few of those left anymore. And the fact that a lot of these families haven't ever hit the market, I think it will add value to his broodmare band that's being dispersed. I think a lot of people will realize that and want to get their hands on some really old families that are still alive and kicking and tried and true.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's interesting you bring up breed to race because, Claiborne has a rich history both on the breeding side and the racing side. And it's felt like in recent years, I haven't noticed you guys as much on the racing side, but maybe that's me missing some of your horses. What do you think is first, 2-part question. First, how do you guys make the decision in terms of what horses to keep to race? And then secondly, what percentage of the business do you think ideally you would have as the racing side versus the breeding side?
So we probably have a total of just rough numbers, say 50 mares. 25 of those would be Claiborne only mares, and the other 25 would be mares that we have with our longtime partner, Adele Dilschneider. And primarily speaking, we pretty much keep everything we have with Adele because she loves to race, and we obviously do too. And it is a little bit less expensive when you can cut the bills in half. But for basically the most part, the Claiborne mares, we sell everything these days. It's like running a farm's expensive. We have 3,000 acres, 100 employees. It's not cheap to keep this place going. And unfortunately, you have to sell. It's so hard to race. I mean, obviously, we'll keep a filly or two out of the crops per year. But usually we have to sell just to help stay in business, quite frankly. Now we have, like this past year, we stayed in for a leg on a filly or two that we sold, so we'll do things like that. But primarily the Claiborne mares are more commercial, and I'd say the Claiborne Dilschneider mares are breed to race.
Right. No, I think that's a fair assessment of the economics of the industry right now. Is that you at least have to offer them in sale, and if you end up with them back for whatever reason, the market doesn't see they're worth as much. There's a vet issue, what have you. Then you end up with some back. But I think it's prudent the way you're doing it by at least offering to the marketplace. What else is out there now? This is the big week when a lot of the farms come out and start announcing stud fees for 2025. We've seen a couple of farms that have already done so. You said pre-show that you had a big announcement. You're already have Bright Future that's added to the roster, and there's going to be another stallion added to the roster.
Yeah, so I think you guys might be the first to hear, and the press release will be out either tomorrow or the next day. But Prince of Monaco, we've secured his breeding rights, so
nice.
He's probably one of the favorites for the Breeders' Cup Sprint right now. Yeah. He was obviously an extremely fast 2-year-old, ran a 103 buyer, won a grade 1 as a 2-year-old, and nearly missed 2 grade 1s at Saratoga this summer. Obviously, the first in the Woody Stevens, he had an atrocious trip, was much the best, and just got beat. And then in the second start in the Jerkins, he just missed the line, missed the bob with domestic products. So he ran 2 great races this summer, and we're looking forward to seeing what he can do this fall.
That's incredible stuff. Very fast son of Speightstown out of a medallion.
He's the only 2-year-old son of Speightstown to win a grade 1 as a 2-year-old, which is hard to believe.
Is that right? Wow.
Yeah, I know. As many good sons as he's had, he's the only grade 1 winning son.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Wow.
Yeah.
So,
and with Speightstown,
he's obviously a great sire. So, Prince of Monaco, he's a $950,000 yearling. He's a gorgeous individual. He's going to be backed by great supporters in Stone Street and SF Bloodstock and their partners, Starlight. So we're really looking forward to having him standing in here.
Do we have an
Very
idea
exciting.
of what his stud fee is going to be yet?
TBD. We'll see how he runs in the Breeders' Cup. The planet that, TBD.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Such a journalist asking the hard-hitting follow-up question. Yeah.
I wish I had a
hard-
number to
the
tell you.
hard-hitting
We
question-
honestly don't know. I mean, we've talked about it internally, but until, I can tell you we've already had a ton of requests for him.
Oh, yeah.
Just from people that have known that he's coming here. So
Yeah.
we're excited to announce to the public very shortly.
That's great.
That's awesome.
Congratulations. And thanks for doing it
Yeah.
on the show. Can we make sure we have 4? Can we reserve 4 for DJ? Is that possible?
Yeah, I'll put you down right now.
Okay.
Even better.
Always moving and shaking, these two. All right, I want going from the brand new stallions to the stalwart. I got to ask about Warfront. He's one of my favorite stallions. He's been such a boon to Claiborne in the last 10, 15 years. He's such an interesting horse because he was mainly a dirt horse and has become this like superstar turf stallion, which isn't always super fashionable in the in the world of Kentucky stallions. A lot of people are looking for dirt horses, classic horses. Can you just talk about the journey with him? And he didn't come in as like a this Boffo huge first crop sire, but has been a slow burn and is now one of the top sires in the world. Has it been difficult to maintain a turf stallion commercially, or has he just gotten to the point now where his reputation precedes himself?
His reputation definitely precedes himself. Him and First Samurai came in at the exact same time. First Samurai stood for 40. Warfront stood for 12.5. We had to beg people to breed to Warfront, and we were run over the top of First Samurai. And it's First Samurai is a hard knocking horse. I don't mean to take anything away from him, but it's just something funny to see the trajectories of the two, and it just goes to show you really never know. He obviously was a fast son of Danzig. As you mentioned, he was a grade 2 winner on the dirt. But I guess his big break was probably, if you ask most people, he's known as a turf stallion now, which has definitely hurt him, I think, commercially in the last few years because he hasn't really had a top-level dirt runner lately. But that's not to say he can't anymore. I think, unfortunately, he is pegged as a turf stallion, but we still keep breeding some dirt mares to him, thinking we're going to get a good dirt horse at some point. So we'll see what happens. But he's been a stalwart for us. He's been incredible. He's done so much for this farm in the last, like you said, 10 years. And unfortunately, he is getting to the twilight of his career, but he still has a great, success rate in getting them in full. Obviously he's dropped a little bit, but he's still well over 50%. And as long as he continues to do that, we'll keep standing on him. As he doesn't look like his age by any means. You come to look at him, you think, oh, what is he, 15? You're like, no, he's 23. So, but his father bred late in his career as well. So hopefully he can keep it going.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Walker, I want to ask you a personal question, if you don't mind. As the son of an entrepreneur, it was difficult for me to kind of find my way as to what I wanted to do. And you're in a 4th or 5th generation family business now. What things have you found have been the hardest for you? And what things are you most proud of in the first couple of chapters of your position?
I'd say the hardest thing is trying to, we're a very traditional, old school kind of farm, and the times have changed so much where there's such a commercial market now. Mm-hmm. It's been really, really difficult to try and stay true to your ways and the way you're doing things while also keeping up with the times. But I feel like we've slowly evolved and we're finally getting ahead of it. We just hired Jacob West to help with our bloodstock work and sell some seasons. And he brings a great fresh perspective that has that kind of a lot more commercial pass and say I do. So I think he'll be a great asset to the team. But that's probably, to answer your first question, that's probably been the struggle. And then, being 5th generation, you have this legacy to live up to, right? I mean, just look behind me. I didn't put all those books there. Those are my grandfathers, great grandfathers, their fathers. So, just trying to maintain that legacy and carry it on and do it the right way. It's ever so difficult, but I think we're heading in the right direction here, and I'm excited for the future.
Along those same lines, did you ever think of doing anything else, or was this always going to be your path?
My father never pushed me to do this, and I think because of that, I probably wanted to do it more. I think if he would have made me get out of bed at 5 o'clock in the morning and go muck stalls before I went to school or something, I probably would sucks. I don't want to do this. Just really resented it. But because I got to work the sales when I was off from school on the weekend, kind of do it my own way. And I did work my way up. He told me at an early age, look, if you got to start at the bottom if you're going to do this. And for a couple summers, I weeded probably this entire farm at one point or another, put the hay and straw in the barns and worked on the maintenance crew and did all that stuff. And then slowly started working with yearlings as I got a little bigger and stronger, and got a degree in animal sciences with a specialization in equine at the University of Florida. So, I kind of had an educational background along with the firsthand experience here at the farm. So it's been a good journey. I'm glad he treated me the way I did, and just trying not to let anybody down.
No, I think you've been carrying the legacy on and making it your own, which is the toughest part. It's like you said, it's a difficult dance, a difficult balance to be involved with. But Walker, my last question is, what is your favorite part of the industry? Is it the racing? Is it doing the matings? Is it greeting people when they come to the farm tours? What's your favorite part?
This business is so great because every month is something different. Like to me, like September's for sales, October's like Keeneland racing, November's breeding stock sales and Breeders' Cup. And then December is kind of like the off month, I feel like. But then you got a lot of admin work, kind of getting ready for next year. And
right.
Then January starts, you get the following season. But to answer your question, you've heard like athletes, like say Jason Worth or whatever. They say you can't, like they retire from sports, and then they can't ever. They're trying to fill that void of what they missed in sports, and you really don't get that until you have one going into the gate for a grade stakes or something like that.
Right.
And that feeling of like anxiety and nervousness and excitement is like really hard to duplicate. And, that's what sells this sport. I mean, we have very wealthy people in this industry and they can buy anything, but you can't kind of buy that feeling or excitement you have for maybe your horse that's about to run in a grade 1. And it's really special. And, I guess to answer your question, that probably is the most exciting part, but I really do love waking up in the mornings in the spring and going to see the foals for the first time out of like a nice mare that's, just full of a nice intermission colt. And you just have hopes or something for the future, what that horse might bring. So there's so many great aspects to it, but not to be left out is the excitement of racing.
Yeah. I always tell the new West Point partners, like, there's nothing like those butterflies when your horse is loaded into the gate.
Oh yeah. The walk from the paddock until they get in the gate, it's like 6 minutes, but it feels like it's about 60 minutes.
Yeah.
Your heart's beating on your chest, and you're just hoping you don't have a heart attack or faint or something.
For sure. We need you in this business, Walker. Don't go keeling over on us anytime soon. But yeah, man, thank you so much for the time. I appreciate all you do. And best of luck with the new Stallions in the 2025 season.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me on. It's great to talk to you.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Walker.
Anytime.
I appreciate it.
All right, so that's going to do it for episode 64 of Rail Talk. Thank you to John Roach for coming by and explaining to us the latest in the legal back and forth around HISA. Thank you to Walker Hancock for coming through and talking to us a little bit. Thank you to our producer, Patty Wolf, my co-host, Jon Green, our associate producers, Julia Agresta and Nathan Wilkinson. We'll see you back here next week. Next week, I will be back on Rail Talk along with the rest of the crew. See you then.